Hi, thanks for being here. Welcome to Storytime with Dave Booker. Today, you on with Soleman Rogues Gallery, and I already have the next book kind of outlined at least, so there will be another one of these. The next book after we get done with this, because we've got maybe 2 weeks left in this one, will be that one down there, Mystery in My Pocket. So we'll do a few readings of that while I finish up book number 4 of Sheriff in a Small Town. So we got some stuff coming. And today's chapter is A Return to the Victorian Club. Franklin opened the door and led them into the library. Marjorie took the ladies into the ladies' room. Victor came in and sat down beneath an ornate lantern. He flipped a switch and the lantern began to rotate, slowly sending sparks and flashes at regular intervals. It is to be a combined attack, integration and hypnosis, thought Perry. Victor sat in a regal velvet chair, crossed his legs, and placed a large open book on his lap. He began to read, his voice a toneless monotone. Oedipus was getting bored, and his mind was wandering. Perry's shoes began to glow softly, filling Perry with will and the strength of mind to resist. Half an hour after hour, the zoning hit. Have you ever had one of those days where you just can't talk? Well, I'm having one today. Okay, let's do this one again. Here we go. Perry's shoes began to glow softly, filling Perry with will and the strength of mind to resist. Hour after hour, the droning continued. Perry heard the words and acted accordingly. Oedipus was slowly going under the influence of the hypnotic suggestions. He began to repeat what was being said. Perry let his eyes roll and his form relax. He too began to repeat the lessons. Victor smiled and turned the page. With the two men finally under, he began the most important part. You are the master of your home, and your wives must be subservient to you. Should they begin to show a will of their own, you must subdue them. You must force them to always obey you. The more they resist, the more you enforce your will on them. When they wish to separate themselves from your presence, the anger will flare and you will lash out in any manner you need to. You will not kill them, but you must inform your will, even if it means that you strike them with hand or fist. Destroy that which they have used to seek refuge. Deface them so that their beauty is no longer their strength. Remember that always you are the Lord and Master, and they must obey you. In the room reserved for the ladies, a similar session was in progress. Marjorie was seated in a high-backed chair with a rotating lamp above her. The flashes of soft light were aimed to strike the eyes of the ladies seated opposite. The room was warm and relaxing, so that the two women began to feel drowsy. From a side table, Marjorie took a large book and opened it onto her lap. She began to read. Her normally lilting tones now were flat and monotonous. She read slowly so that every word penetrated their consciousness. Your husband is your Lord and Master. He is everything to you and for you. You will always do whatever he asks you to do. You will maintain the home for him and manage the servants, so he is free to create the wealth you both will enjoy. You will never speak harshly to him, but keep your voice soft and gentle. You will never show anger or irritation if you do not get what you desire. He will give you what you need. If he beats you or mars you, it is because you have acted in such a way that he had no choice. You brought it upon yourselves by not doing as he required. He will provide for you only so long as you are there for him. Once you seek to separate yourself from his presence, he is free to do as he will, to bring you back to your duty. Never forget that the home and all it contains belong to him and him alone. So long as you reside within its walls, you also are his and his alone. Over and over, the words were repeated. Persephone, with a strong will, was able to resist this indoctrination, but not so Cherin. The soft warmth and flashing lights worked easily on her. Persephone showed an effort to resist, but gradually succumbed to the hypnotic effect. She too began to repeat the lessons. After an hour, and seeing they were thoroughly mesmerized, she put on a record that would continually repeat the lessons. Leaving the room, she waited at the door. Beside the door was a picture with a peephole that was connected to a jewel embroidered tapestry, which had one glass jewel she could spy through. She watched for 10 minutes to ensure they were not feigning their absorption of the instructions. She met her husband in the office. He also had been checking on the subjects in the library. He looked up as the door entered. Two more under our spell now. I believe this will be the most useful. She nodded and looked back towards the room she had just vacated. I wasn't sure about the taller woman. She resisted at first, and I wasn't sure she would or could be hypnotized. She eventually succumbed and hasn't moved. I still don't know absolutely that she is under, so I want to check once more. 5 minutes elapsed before she returned. No, I think it's all right. She's still repeating the lessons. Victor leaned back in his chair and lit a pipe. Yeah, I had a similar problem with one of the mine. He too seemed to resist, but it eventually took hold. It always does after a while. He sat puffing happily away at his pipe, but his wife was wringing her handkerchief. Victor looked at her with a raised brow and exasperation in his voice. Darling, what is it? You've checked them, and they're completely in our sway. Why are you fretting? I just feel that those two are different from the rest, especially the older gentleman. Victor leaned back and placed his boots on the desk. I don't think so. Calmly took a long draw and slowly blew out a plume of smoke. Ever since I found these boots, I've never been more successful. Remember when we were down and out on the streets? It was during a thunderstorm, and we had just been kicked out of that small, disreputable hotel for non-payment. My shoes finally gave way, and I was staying there in bare feet when there was a roar of thunder and a bolt of lightning struck the light post. We were blinded. When we recovered, there at the base of the light pole were these boots. It's true that they were rather evil smelling, but they were something to wear and cover my frozen toes. Once on, they almost seemed to adjust to my feet. Suddenly, I felt sure that things were going to get better. I was going into the hotel and demand our luggage when the man rushed out past me with a bat after him. I cleaned out the cash register and we started on rebuilding our fortune. Hell, we've never looked back. He gave the boots a polish with his handkerchief. Since then, we have been risen steadily until we were able to start this club. With our indoctrination, we created men who eventually will abuse their wives. They take them to the hospital, come to us in bewilderment, we give them a fresh start. Meanwhile, they are completely under our thumb. One wrong move, one sign that they are going to split on us, and the police will have a full record of what they have done. How many do we have under control under? Pretty much now, 15? Wow, soon we'll have close to 20 and we can do some real big jobs. Hell, we've even programmed them so that if they get arrested, all knowledge of our little club is washed away. It just doesn't get any better than this. By 9 o'clock in the morning, the new recruits were awake. For an hour, Victor and Marjorie checked to see if the programming had stuck. Convinced it all going according to plan, the four were given a light repast and then escorted to the door. Cherin was practically dancing to the car as she was in such a relaxed and pleasant frame of mind. She clung onto Oedipus's arm and had her head on his shoulder. Persephone was a bit more austere, but she did hold on to Perry's arm affectionately, walking in step gracefully. From behind closed curtains, Victor and Marjorie watched with approval, thoroughly convinced that their new acquisitions would bear fruit. On the drive home, Perry just checked on everyone's condition. He was even unsure of himself. He had been conscious the entire time and fighting the effects of hypnosis and repetition, but it was always possible that some of the training had to seep through. If that was true, then Persephone could be in danger. The training was to bring about a change in the man so that he would, without doubt, cause some form of damage to his wife. He would then go to the club where they would arrange for his new identity. More than likely, a portion of the man's wealth would pass into Victor as payment for his services. The man would be induced to find a new wife, and the process would begin again and again. The man would be continually under Victor and Marjorie's thumb and blackmailed into committing any act they directed. Harry drove to the shoebox. He needed to be deprogrammed just in case. Oedipus didn't seem to be affected, near to Persephone. In his sanctum, he set the wheels of recovery in progress. Persephone had a moment of realization. They would need some guide as to behavior and progress of the indoctrination. Oedipus seemed to be just the same, but was he? Were any of them? Harry sent Oedipus and Cherin to get some lunch. They were to return after a couple of hours. While they were gone, Perry and Persephone ensured that they were fully deprogrammed. They had watched carefully over Oedipus and Cherin. Cherin was the most susceptible and had probably absorbed the most training. Harry had noticed that Oedipus had put up a good fight, but that he too seemed to have succumbed at least partially in the end. Well, they were to be their guides. Their actions would be mirrored by Perry and Persephone. At the point when things were about to go south, they would be forestalled and deprogrammed. Since the final outcome was known, it would be a simple matter to arrange for a believable finale. It was only the timing of progression that was unknown. This was where they would do the guiding. Oedipus and Cherin returned arm in arm. The look on Cherin's face was one of love and pride that she was with him. The look on Oedipus was loving, confident, with just the slightest touch of arrogance. The training was already working its way into his thoughts and actions. Driving home, Oedipus was looking over the stocks and bonds in the paper. Cherin was asking when the next dance was at the club. Persephone checked her pocket calendar, remarking that it was on Friday next week. Cherin's eyes gleamed, and she made small dancing movements with her feet. Persephone and Cherin spoke adoringly about the dances and the new friends they would meet. Harry discussed the lad's quests and possibilities with Oedipus. The days passed up to the dance in staid progression. They would arise by 9, breakfast and enjoy company for an hour or so, and then the men would recuse themselves in the library to work on increasing their funds, while the women would talk, plan outings, and run the home. By lunchtime, the men sent out their orders to their brokers or placed some themselves. With Perry's acumen and Oedipus's research and savvy, they were steadily becoming much wealthier. They had visitors periodically from other members of the club. Since they were new, they received their guests with respect. The men met to discuss investments, and the wives met to discuss husbands. It was in the solarium, talking with the women, that Persephone had the hardest time. She knew a good deal about the Victorian way of life. Victorian wives were not as full of their husbands as these women were. It seems as if they were moths and their husbands were a flame around which they flittered. She loved Perry. There was no doubt in her heart about that, but she was not so besotted by him that there was nothing else in her world. She listened with half her mind as she considered that Victor had chosen what he considered to be the most definitive portions of Victorian society, and that was what he had based his training on. For the woman, it was complete happiness in being home and taking care of it and her husband. For the men, it was the accumulation of wealth and the power of being total master in their home. When this was over, she was determined to deprogram these ladies and give them their minds back. As far as she could see, the women really received nothing in return for their abject devotion. They were tools to be used, abused, and then tossed aside. Once they were on their own again, their minds were confused. They saw everything as their fault. It was pathetic and an abomination. Fear was having almost identical thoughts. Conversing with these men was boring and irritating. They had no goal in life save the accumulation of wealth. Their home was their castle, and they held absolute sway. Their wives were functional ornaments who maintained the home but had no other authority. Fear was not above increasing his own wealth, since it gave him the freedom to pursue his role as Soleman, but wasn't his only interest. These men thought about little else and used each other to further their ends. He could never be friends with them. It wondered how much of the way they were was through indoctrination, how much was already a part of their makeup. He looked at Oedipus for the answer. Oedipus had been a man whose interest in accumulating wealth had only begun when he brought in contact with himself, but it had never consumed him. It was a way to be able to do as he pleased and not worry about having a 9-to-5 job. He was free to see Cherin or pursue criminals at will without worrying about being able to afford it. They had spent their days pursuing interests in common or each teaching the other interests they held alone. Temporarily now, that aspect of their relationship was gone. When they had returned, the servants had returned as well. The fact that they were double agents had supposedly been wiped from their minds. So this was over. Perry was determined to settle matters with Frederick. A knock at the door, and Frederick entered, delivering a missive. Perry opened it and announced his apologies, but he was called to a meeting. Picking up his briefcase and cane, he went to the car and headed out. Stopping, he moved to the rear seat, pulled down the shade, and converted to his alter ego. He parked several blocks away and walked to the shoebox. Podolsky was already in residence, and his agitation was evident. Soleman, I need your help. I've been talking to the men who have been beaten. They have no recollection of what they did or why. I'm sure there's some sort of mind control happening here, since I found that their fingerprints match certain men who have been reported missing. It looks as though they tried to remove the prints with acid. There still was enough to get a positive ID, though. Oddly, they have no memory of their former lives. I've got one man in particular that I want you to work on, but I don't have a clue how to deprogram him. You have any ideas? Perry smiled and pulled out this tape. I think this might assist you. Play this and have him listen for a couple of hours. Use headphones to make sure he doesn't get distracted. Podolsky began to leave with thanks when Perry changed his mind and accompanied him. On the way to the station, Perry was looking more and more worried about what they were about to do. What effect would having their memory restored completely with all that they had done and been made to do? Their abuse of someone they loved, the scarring of the face they cherished, all the tasks they had been blackmailed into doing, how would they react? He discussed it with Podolsky. Detective Podolsky, this tape will assuredly accomplish what you want, but is it really something we ought to be doing? Podolsky pulled over. Why not? These men have been brainwashed. They have no recollection of who they are, what they have done. Soleman nodded. Yeah, exactly. They have no recollection of their former wife, whom they cared for and did irreparable damage to. They have committed acts that in their right minds they would never have acceded to. Now what happens when full realization hits? The pain of knowledge will be devastating. Podolsky acknowledged what Soleman had said. I agree, we're dealing with a dangerous situation. However, the man I'm talking about is already partially aware of his wife, remember? Remember when you were holding her picture, how upset he became? Now he's looking for answers. I think we might even be able to bring them together. Tell you what, he's waiting at the station for me to return. You talk to him, and I'll let you decide what we do and where we go from here. Perry nodded. For better or worse, this man needed to be made whole again. All right, beg your pardon. Sorry. That's it for today. We're kind of short on time. So that's it for this chapter. Glad you could be here. Hope to see you again on Tuesday, Friday. So we'll be doing, I think, 2 more chapters on Thursday. So I appreciate you being here. Look forward to seeing you again. Be good and be good to yourself. Bye.